Hey everyone, welcome back to another deep dive.
Mhm.
Um, Today we're going to be looking at Law 29 from Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power.
Plan all the way to the end.
Plan all the way to the end.
Yeah.
And this one is really interesting because it sounds
It does.
pretty simple on the surface, right?
Yeah, yeah. It sounds very straightforward.
Have a plan.
Yeah, just plan.
But there's actually a lot more to it,
A lot more to unpack than you might initially think.
for sure.
So I'm excited to dive into this one with you.
Yeah, this is a good one.
So what is it about this law that makes it so powerful and important, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's about developing a strategic mindset.
Yeah.
I mean, planning ahead, it's not just about, scheduling appointments or making lists. It's about being able to see the whole board,
Mm-hmm.
being able to anticipate the consequences of your actions and navigate challenges.
Yeah, it's like thinking several moves ahead in a game of chess.
Exactly. And that's what gives you control. I mean, you gain control over the outcomes that you want when you can plan all the way to the end.
So it's less about the what of planning and more about the why and the how.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Greene really emphasizes the importance of foresight, which you were just talking about, this idea of anticipating the
Yes.
consequences and seeing the entire playing field.
Hmm.
Why is that so crucial, especially in today's world?
Well, because without that clear vision of where you want to go, it's easy to get distracted, to waste resources,
Yeah,
and then ultimately you fall short of your goals.
right. And I think a lot of people struggle with this because,
Oh, yeah.
especially in today's world, we're so focused on the now.
The instant gratification.
Yeah, like the quick win, the
It's-
immediate results.
Exactly.
So how do we kind of shift our thinking to be more long-term focused?
Well, it's like anything else. It takes practice.
Yeah.
But it starts with really understanding the value of having that long-term vision.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it like building a house.
Mhm.
You wouldn't just start laying bricks without a blueprint.
Right.
You need to know what you're building, how it's going to withstand the test of time, and what potential challenges you might encounter along the way.
Right. It's about having that foundation to
Yeah.
build upon.
Yeah.
And I think we've all seen what happens when people or organizations don't plan ahead.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we see businesses that expand too quickly
Right.
and then implode, or maybe even relationships that fall apart
Mhm.
because they didn't address those difficult issues early on.
They didn't have those tough conversations.
Exactly.
And they didn't plan for the future of the relationship.
Yeah. It's like that saying, failing to plan is planning to fail.
It's true.
But in this case, it's not just about avoiding failure. It's about setting ourselves up for
Use the
lasting
expert there.
success,
It's about success.
whatever that looks like for each individual.
Yes.
So on the flip side of that, what does successful long-term planning look like in practice?
Well, the book mentions Alexander the Great.
Oh,
It's a really good example.
He's kind of the classic example
Yeah.
of someone who was very strategic
Right.
and planned.
Well, and his ability to conquer all that territory that wasn't just about brute force. He was a meticulous planner.
Right.
He studied his enemies. He secured his supply lines. He made sure every battle was bringing him closer to his ultimate vision.
So he was thinking about the end goal
Yes.
from the very beginning.
Awesome.
And every action he took was in service of that goal.
Exactly. And it was all connected.
That's fascinating.
It is.
So there was this deliberate connection between his day-to-day activities and his long-term vision.
Yeah,
It wasn't just about winning the battle in front of him. It was
Right.
about winning the entire war.
exactly.
But we also know that not every great leader was a master planner.
True.
The source material brings up Napoleon Bonaparte,
Ah, yes.
who, despite his strategic brilliance,
He was brilliant.
made a crucial mistake during his invasion of Russia,
Yeah, the Russian winter.
the Russian winter.
He underestimated it.
Yeah, and that's kind of a classic example
it's like a example.
of how even the greatest minds
Yes.
can be undone
Mhm.
by overlooking crucial details in that long-term planning process.
Okay, got to get the details.
You got to think about everything.
Everything.
So it's not just about having a plan. It's
Yeah.
about making sure that plan accounts for potential pitfalls,
Yes.
even those that seem unlikely
Right.
or distant at the time.
Yeah.
And that's a great transition into talking about the modern world.
Okay.
Because let's be honest, things move a lot faster now
Much faster.
than they did in Napoleon's time.
Oh, yeah.
So does this law still hold up in our hyper-connected,
Does.
constantly evolving world?
I think it's even more relevant today.
Okay.
Yeah, think about the story of WeWork.
Oh, yeah, WeWork.
That's a company that rose really fast
Yeah, huge rise.
and fell just as quickly.
And a huge fall.
Huge fall.
So with such a promising start, attracting all that investment, generating so much buzz.
Mm-hmm.
How did WeWork's strategy ultimately backfire?
Well, Adam Neumann, the former CEO,
Yeah.
he had this vision,
Okay.
this really bold vision to kind of revolutionize the way people work and create this global community.
Okay.
But his planning was short-sighted.
Okay.
He was so focused on expanding rapidly and getting those high valuations
Right.
that he neglected the fundamentals, like
Right.
profitability.
Oh, okay. The
But
basics.
the basics, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was almost like his ambition kind of became his downfall.
It's possible.
Is there a fine line between a bold vision
I think there is.
and then reckless planning?
You need both.
Yeah.
You need the vision
Right.
and you need the planning to back it up.
And the follow-through.
Yes.
So that kind of brings us to someone like Warren Buffett,
Okay.
who embodies the opposite approach.
The long game.
Yeah, instead of chasing those quick profits,
Right.
he's known for his incredibly patient,
Yes.
long-term investment strategy.
He's very carefully selecting companies.
Yeah, with strong fundamentals.
With strong fundamentals. And he holds on to those investments.
For decades.
For decades.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty stark contrast
It is.
to what we were just talking about with WeWork.
Right.
So Buffett's success is a testament to the power of playing the long game.
It really is.
He's a master of thinking decades ahead.
Yeah, and his track record proves it.
Right.
It speaks for itself.
And that's really interesting, especially when we contrast that with the move fast and break things mentality
Yes.
that we see so often in the tech world,
Yeah.
where it's all about,
Yeah, just get it out there.
disruption and rapid innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any other modern examples that really showcase this power of planning all the way to the end?
Well, think about Amazon.
Okay.
I mean, Jeff Bezos didn't just set out to create an online bookstore.
No.
He had a vision for a global e-commerce empire
Wow.
from the beginning.
So he was already thinking about that
From the start?
before most people even knew what e-commerce was.
Yeah, he was way ahead of the curve.
So instead of just thinking about selling books, he was building a system that could handle massive scale and growth.
That's right.
That's incredible.
He prioritized logistics, data infrastructure, customer experience.
All those things.
Those things.
Most people probably wouldn't have even thought about at that early stage.
Yeah, he was thinking long term.
He was thinking ahead.
Way ahead.
So he was anticipating customer needs
Yeah.
and planning for future innovations before most people even knew
Right.
what those innovations would be.
Yeah, he was a visionary.
That's incredible.
It is.
I think we've got a lot to learn from these examples.
I think so too.
But maybe this is a good place to pause
Yeah.
and give everybody a chance to absorb all of this.
Sounds good to me.
We'll pick up this conversation back up in
Okay.
the next part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about how important it is to think long term.
Right. This whole idea of foresight and planning ahead.
Yeah. And we looked at some pretty interesting examples, both good and bad.
Yeah. From Alexander the Great all the way to Amazon.
Exactly. So now I'm curious, how do we actually apply this law to our own lives?
Yeah. That's a great question. Because it's one thing to talk about these grand historical figures.
Right. This is on a different level.
But how do we as everyday people actually put this into practice?
Well, I think it's important to remember that there's a balance to be struck here. We've been talking about how crucial planning is. But planning all the way to the end, I mean, that can sometimes feel overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. It can be paralyzing if you take it too far.
Right. You get so caught up in trying to anticipate every single scenario that you never actually do anything.
Yeah. You get stuck in analysis paralysis.
Exactly. So how do we avoid that trap?
That's the million-dollar question.
It's about recognizing that no plan is perfect.
Yeah.
You know, unexpected things are going to happen.
Things always come up.
They always do.
Yep.
And that's okay. The key is to have a solid roadmap, but to be willing to adapt and adjust course when necessary.
So it's not about having a rigid set of instructions.
No.
It's more about having a flexible framework.
Exactly. A framework that can guide you through those inevitable twists and turns.
So it's like having a plan A, but also having a plan B and C, and maybe even D in your back pocket.
Yes. Be prepared for anything.
Just in case things go sideways.
Exactly. And this actually brings us back to this idea of thinking all the way to the end.
Okay.
It's not just about having a plan for reaching your goal.
Right.
It's about thinking about what happens after you achieve that goal.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, let's say your goal is to start a successful business. You might spend months, even years, planning for that launch day.
Okay.
But what happens on day 2? On day 100?
Oh, wow. I see what you mean.
What are your plans for sustaining that success?
Yeah, you hit the goal, and then it's like, okay, now what?
Exactly. It's like climbing a mountain. Reaching the summit is an incredible accomplishment, but you still got to figure out how to get back down.
Safely.
Safely, exactly.
So we need to think about both the climb and the descent.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do once we're back on level ground.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this applies to all areas of life, not just business goals.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about relationships. Let's say you're planning a wedding.
Great.
You put so much thought into every detail of that one perfect day.
It's a big day.
It is. But what about the marriage itself?
Okay.
Have you thought about how you'll handle conflict, how you'll support each other through challenges, how you'll keep the spark alive years down the road?
So it's about seeing the bigger picture.
Yes. The wedding is just one day, but the marriage hopefully is a lifetime.
Right. And it's the same with any long-term goal.
Exactly. Planning all the way to the end means thinking about the entire journey, not just the destination.
Okay, I get that. But how do we actually do that? How do we plan for the unknown?
Well, you can't predict the future, of course.
Right.
But you can ask yourself some key questions.
Okay, like what?
Once you've defined your goal, ask yourself, what happens next? And then what are the potential consequences of achieving this goal, both positive and negative?
And how will those consequences shape my future actions?
Exactly. That's where what Greene calls second-order thinking comes into play.
Second-order thinking.
Yes. It's basically thinking several steps ahead. Anticipating potential challenges and opportunities so you can make better decisions.
Okay, so can you give me an example of what that might look like in a real-life situation?
Sure. Imagine you're trying to land a new client for your business.
Okay.
First-order thinking would be focused solely on closing the deal.
Got it.
But second-order thinking would prompt you to ask, what happens after we sign the contract?
Okay.
What are the client's expectations? Do we have the resources to deliver? What if the project goes over budget or faces delays?
So you're thinking beyond that initial win.
Yes. And considering the potential ripple effects of your actions.
Yeah, it's like avoiding those, oh no, I didn't think about that moments down the line.
Exactly. It's about taking a more holistic view and making sure your actions are aligned with your long-term goals.
And that reminds me of the Amazon example.
Oh, right.
Jeff Bezos didn't just plan to build an online bookstore. He was thinking about building a global e-commerce empire.
Yes. He was thinking way ahead.
So he was anticipating customer needs and planning for future innovations before most people even knew what e-commerce was.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of second-order thinking in action.
So he was playing a strategic game of chess almost.
Yes. Always thinking several moves ahead.
That's incredible.
It is. But the principle applies to all of us. Whether we're starting a business, writing a book, or just trying to improve a relationship, thinking about the long-term consequences of our actions can have a huge impact on our success.
So to recap what we've covered so far, planning all the way to the end isn't just about creating a detailed roadmap. It's about defining your ultimate goal.
Yes.
Breaking it down into smaller steps, anticipating obstacles, practicing second-order thinking, staying adaptable, and most importantly, considering what happens after you achieve that initial goal.
That's right.
Anything else we should touch on before we wrap up this part?
Yes, I think it's important to revisit this idea of the illusion of control.
Okay.
We've been talking about flexibility and adaptability.
Right.
But it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking we can control every aspect of our lives.
Yeah. It's tempting to think that if we plan enough, we can eliminate all uncertainty.
But the truth is, even with the best plans, there are always things outside of our control.
Things happen.
They do. And that's okay. The key is to recognize that uncertainty is just part of life.
So we plan for the future, but also accept that we don't know everything.
Exactly. And that unexpected things will happen.
So it's like embracing the unknown while also preparing for it as best we can.
Yes. Finding that sweet spot between planning and accepting the unpredictable nature of life.
That's a tough balance to strike.
It is. But when you find it, that's when you can really unlock your power.
This has been really insightful. I'm already starting to think about how I can apply these principles to my own life.
I'm glad to hear that.
Both personally and professionally.
It's all connected.
Yeah. So maybe it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Give our listeners a moment to reflect on everything we've talked about.
Yes. We'll be back soon to finish up our exploration of Law 29.
But until then, I encourage everyone to think about how they can integrate these principles into their own lives.
Okay, we are back for the final part of our deep dive into Law 29 plan all the way to the end. This has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
I feel like it's one of those topics that really makes you stop and think about how you approach pretty much everything.
I agree. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget about the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I'd love to get your final thoughts on this law. What are the most important things for our listeners to remember about planning all the way to the end? Well, I think one of the key takeaways here is that power really lies in foresight. It's about recognizing that we have the ability to shape our own futures.
It's like we become the architects of our own lives
Exactly. Instead of just reacting to whatever comes our way.
and take control of the narrative.
Yes. And that starts with defining your ultimate goal. What is it that you truly want to achieve?
Right. Once you have that vision, you can start working backwards, breaking it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
Exactly. And then, of course, we can't forget about those potential obstacles.
The roadblocks.
Yes. Anticipating challenges and developing contingency plans is crucial.
Yeah, because things rarely go exactly according to plan.
Never. And that's where adaptability comes in.
So it's not just about having a plan, but being willing to adjust it.
It's an ongoing process. It's not a one-time thing.
Yeah, it's about constantly reassessing, refining your strategy as you go.
Right. Because things change.
Yeah.
New information comes up.
So it's more about having a dynamic roadmap that can evolve.
Exactly. Instead of clinging to a rigid plan that might become obsolete.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's worth repeating that this law applies to so many different areas of life.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just for, CEOs and world leaders.
Right. Whether you're working on a career goal, a relationship, or even just planning a vacation.
It all comes down to thinking about the long-term consequences of your actions.
And making those choices that are going to lead you towards the future you want.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. Planning all the way to the end isn't just about achieving success. It's about living a more intentional and empowered life. It's about making conscious choices that are aligned with your values and ultimately creating the future that you envision.
That's a great way to put it. It's not just about reaching the destination. It's about enjoying the journey and shaping it in a way that feels meaningful and fulfilling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I believe that when we embrace this mindset, when we take the time to plan strategically and think beyond the immediate horizon, we unlock a level of power and agency that can truly transform our lives.
So to everyone listening, are you thinking far enough ahead? Are you planning all the way to the end? I hope this deep dive has given you some new insights and inspire you to take a more strategic approach to achieving your goals. Until next time, keep those minds sharp, those plans flexible, and remember the power to shape your future is in your hands.